Howdy, and welcome to Brandy's Book Stack. Today we'll be talking about the books that I read in the month of June, and then a little bit about my book challenge, Non-Judgmental July. So without further ado, let's jump into the stacks. So I'm going to kind of go with my least favorites this month. If you recall, this month for me was Joyful June, where I try to read books that I know will bring me joy and that I will enjoy. Now, just because I think a book will give me joy, that doesn't always mean that's the case. And a couple of these that was the case with. So we'll go ahead and start with one of those, which is Agatha Christie, The Big Four. So I love Agatha Christie, which is one of the reasons that I chose to pick up this particular novel of hers. However, this was definitely not the best choice. I am reading through them all in order, so, I kind of had to go to the next one. But in this case, the book was, it was focused on an international crime organization, and I found that premise a bit hokey. It was also sort of done in a series of vignettes that almost read more like a short story collection than a novel, and I far prefer novels to short story collections. And Poirot is a Poirot-focused novel. He wasn't always successful, and that's sort of the whole point of Poirot, is that he is, this genius that is always one step ahead of the criminal. And in this case, he wasn't so much, and, until, of course, the end of the novel. And then the really awful part is there is a racial slur in here that is really unpleasant. It is a slur for a Chinese person at the time, and I really, really didn't like that. It was used in a hateful way. There's just absolutely no excusing it. So that just really marred my enjoyment as well. Overall, this was about a 2-star for me, which is extremely rare with an Agatha Christie novel, because I usually really, really enjoy her novels. So if you're looking to pick up something by Agatha Christie, like you've never read anything by her before, don't start with The Big Four. Start with maybe, one of her earlier Poirots. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is a really good one. Of course, And Then There Were None is probably her best known classic mystery, but I would skip The Big Four. So that wasn't as joyful as I would have liked. The next one is kind of in the same vein. I'm starting with the, kind of worst to better, is a Shakespeare play. And I'm usually a really big Shakespeare fan, but in this case, it just didn't hit with me, and I was very surprised by that. And that is King Lear. King Lear is supposed to be one of Shakespeare's masterworks. People love this play. And it may be that I'm dealing with a lot of aging issues in my personal life with my family. My mother is getting older and is dealing with some dementia. My mother-in-law is dealing with dementia. And so this was maybe more of a hard read than it might be for some other people. If you don't know what King Lear is about, King Lear follows King Lear, the titular character, who in already starting kind of to slide downhill into dementia a little bit, he asks his daughters to tell him, his 3 daughters to tell him who loves him the most, and tell me how much you love me. And by how much you say you love me, that's how I will split your fortune. And so 2 of the 3 daughters fawn all over him, being yes people. And one daughter is just honest. I love you like a daughter should, but nothing special here. I love you. And because she doesn't trip over herself trying to tell him how much she loves him and adores him and he's the best thing since sliced bread, he disowns her. And then he decides that he's going to split his time living between the other 2 daughters that said they loved him so much. And of course, they were just posturing to try to get their fortune and didn't really care for him and then mistreat him, and a series of misadventures happen. I didn't find this as quotable as, say, Macbeth or Hamlet or my favorite play, which is Merchant of Venice. So, for me, this was a skip. Again, this was about a 2-star for me. It wasn't my favorite Shakespeare play. And of course, Shakespeare's brilliant. I'm giving you a rating based on my feelings alone. But this is not where I would start with Shakespeare. Hamlet, I think, is a great choice. Again, Merchant of Venice. That's probably one of the ones I'd start with and skip this one. So the next book, we're getting better, is Why Shoot a Butler by Georgette Heyer. And I really loved, I've only read one mystery by Georgette Heyer, and that was Penhallow, and I really, really loved it. I thought it was so complex and interesting and a different way to tell a mystery story. This was much more your just middle of the road, kind of classic whodunit mystery in the English country house. And it did have one thing in common with the Big Four, unfortunately. It has a racial slur in it as well. I give this one more of a pass, not that I give it a pass, but it gets closer to that because they're using an idiom and it's not meant maliciously. But they do say, we worked like N-word. So I was not pleased with that. It marred an otherwise perfectly nice story. I would give this probably a 3. It was okay. It was a good story. I was interested in who actually did shoot the butler, as the title implies. It's kind of a standard, type of those mysteries. The main character meets a girl on the side of the road, and she's sort of in distress, and he finds out there's a dead body in the car. And even though he's normally an extremely law-abiding citizen, he's a barrister, he, for some reason unknown to him, chooses not to call the police on her and lets her kind of get away from there. But he doesn't really get away from the mystery and ends up having to solve it. So it was a good book, but like I said, that racial slur really marred the enjoyment of it. So not a bad one, though. If you want to give Georgette Heyer's mysteries a try, this is perfectly fine. But I'd really recommend you start with Penhallow instead. The next book is kind of sentimental for me. And my father passed away several years ago, and all he ever read were Westerns. And I have to admit, I almost did this for Non-Judgmental July because I'm really not a big Western lover. But I thought, in the way that it gives me sort of a connection with my dad, and it also ties in with June on the Range, I thought that I would read Sackett's Land by Louis L'Amour. Now, this is not technically a Western. This is more like swashbuckling adventure story, really. The Sackett series by Louis L'Amour, he wrote, or Louis L'Amour rather, he wrote this series of novels that are connected, sort of. It's about the same family, the Sackett family, in various time periods as you go along. Most of them are in America. Most of them are Westerns, true Westerns. But this is the progenitor of the Sackett clan starting out in England. I was curious if I was really going to like this or if I was going to think it was so bad, the writing was poor. And I didn't find that. Louis L'Amour is really good about making the plot clickety-clack along. There's not a lot of downtime. There's not a lot of narrative. It is just plot, 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 plot. There are some weaknesses in this book. I would say the main character, Sackett, develops friends stupid fast for no reason. For example, he insults a nobleman in this book and gets in trouble sort of with the law, if you will. And the nobleman is out to kill him. And right the first time when he insults the nobleman, there is a man that comes and befriends him and is essentially risking his life to help him. And then just stays with him and, you know, hitches his fortune to Sackett's. And there's not really presented a good reason for why he does this. There's another instance where he meets a man in a bar, and then that man, I mean, all it says is he meets this man, and then the man's his lifelong friend, does everything for him, without any explanation of, well, why did he become friends? Why did he like you so much? Why was he, you know, not just like you, but willing to sacrifice his life and to tie his fortune to yours? So that was kind of a weakness in the book, but otherwise, you know, it also has a little bit of that misogynist kind of, you know, the only way a man can succeed is with his fists and, you know, by being strong and masculine, grr. But that wasn't too bad. It wasn't like a pumped up to 10 volume or anything like that, just a little bit. Those two things were weaknesses, but everything else about the book, it was actually a pretty good adventure story. Reminded me a lot of, in kind of tone, to The Prisoner of Zenda, which I really loved, if you've read that by Anthony Hope. But it's worth a try. I may actually even pick up another Louis L'Amour and see what I think. And I also had that sort of joyful connection to my father who's passed, and for that reason I enjoyed it a lot. So I would recommend this. I'd probably say 3.5 stars for the Louis L'Amour. Definitely worth it. And you can find these everywhere for not very much money. So if you're interested in that, give it a shot. Now we're getting into the really good novels that I read. The next one, I think all of these are 5 stars moving forward. I thought I had read everything in the Pern novels, but it turns out I hadn't. I hadn't read this novel, Dragon's Kin, by Anne McCaffrey and Todd McCaffrey. I normally don't like it when a child of an author takes up the mantle of their parent. And this is kind of what's happening here with Todd McCaffrey. Anne McCaffrey, of course, wrote the famous Pern novels. And you know, as she was getting older, she brought her son in to write with her. And I think her daughter wrote one novel with her. And I just wasn't too sure I was going to like what he wrote. But this novel was really, really good. It was good enough that I went out and bought all of the other novels that he either wrote in collaboration with her or by himself. And I really, really enjoyed this. This is about a magical animal called a watchware. And you know, the main character is a person, a human being, whose father is the handler of this watchware, and they work in a mining community, and you know, it's sort of about finding your place in society, even if that place isn't what's necessarily expected of you. And I really enjoyed it. I thought the conflict in it felt really real. And I just really liked this book. So 5 out of 5 stars, super enjoyable. The next one is probably my favorite Mary Stewart I have read to date. First of all, look at this cover. I think it's just beautiful. It's kind of shiny, so it's a little bit hard to do with the glare. If you really like cottagecore, I think this is a great book for you. This is a romance story / mystery, mostly focused on the mystery. You have a young woman who goes back to the cottage she grew up in her youth. And one of the things I love about this is in this particular novel, a lot of times romance novelists that write these kind of cozy romances, they tend to write their heroines as incredibly rich, or the man, you know, the male interest is incredibly rich. And in this case, that wasn't the case. In this case, she really wrote a story about more humble people in society. The young woman in this novel, her mother was a servant, and her grandmother was a servant. And she ends up, her grandmother has her go back to this cottage that she grew up in to gather some family documents. And when she shows up at this cottage, she discovers that the family documents are missing. And so she wants to solve the mystery of these missing documents before she tells her grandmother, because her grandmother is ill and is likely to pass shortly, and she wants her to know before then. And it's just a really lovely story. The mystery is pretty low stakes, and it's got a lovely, like I said, romance in it. My perhaps only criticism might be that the romance isn't given enough time to really develop, and this is not super, super long. It is 264 pages, so I think she could have taken a little bit longer and developed that romance a little bit more. It's just sort of wrapped up really quickly at the end. But it's still really good. It is super cozy and joyful, and really the ending is pretty unexpected, and it's really beautiful and a very happy ending, and I really, really enjoyed this book. Next, I read the second installment in the Howl's Moving Castle series, Castle in the Air. I found this book to just be brilliant. There's not a thing I would change about it. If you like the Arabian Nights, if you like that sort of thing, this is like a reinterpretation of an Arabian Nights story, but with everything you might dislike, or at least everything I would dislike, like some of the sexism and misogyny and some of the more unpleasant elements taken out, and all the joy and mystery kept in. And we follow a young man who is a carpet salesman and ends up getting a magic carpet. And the magic carpet takes him places when he dreams. And he dreams of this young woman, and she becomes his love interest, and it's all about rescuing her. She gets kidnapped, and it's about rescuing her. It's the purest book, and I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It is just so innocent, but yet so interesting and lovely at the same time. And this ending actually managed to surprise me. It's not often that I'm surprised as a reader anymore, even in mysteries. But this had an ending I did not expect, and it was wonderful. Just wonderful. I will also say, just to kind of give you a warning, if you're expecting the characters from Howl's Moving Castle to be centric to this story, they are in a way, but they don't show up for a good, hefty portion of this book. So just be expecting that, but you won't be disappointed if you'll stick with it. 5 out of 5 stars. This book was really incredible, just lovely and charming, and absolutely what I wanted to read for Joyful June. So if you're needing kind of a pick-me-up, and of course it's a young adult novel, so it's a pretty easy read, this is where to start. Another cozy novel that we'll finish up with here today is Miss Read's Thrush Green. I had some YouTubers mention that Miss Read wrote really wonderful, cozy novels about sort of English countryside life. And this was a really excellent example of that. I really enjoyed this story. If you liked something like Cranford, I suggest that you pick up a Miss Read book, because it's kind of that similar feeling. Just really simple stories about what goes on in country life. And of course, there's a couple of romances in the storyline. Just very simple, sweet, loving stories about people coming together. It's just really, really lovely. It's hard to describe. It's one of those books that just gives you a cozy feeling as you read it. You just feel nice and warm all over, completely joyful. I totally recommend that you check out Miss Read's Thrush Green. I've already been picking up other novels by Miss Read because I so enjoyed this one. So definitely give this one a shot. So that's it. This was a pretty productive month for me. I don't normally get to 8 books in a month, so I was pretty proud of my reading this time. And just to talk real quick as a reminder, my other challenge, which is Non-Judgmental July, is almost, to a close, sort of. Because I will tell you, I have been reading some material for Non-Judgmental July. I've been reading a Danielle Steel novel. Danielle Steel was an author. I always kind of was like, oh, she's a bunch of fluff, right? She writes all these racy romance novels that don't have a lot of substance. And this is one of the things I want to challenge about myself, is reading outside my comfort zone, reading something I'm a little bit judgmental about in the past. And so I decided to give one of her novels a try. And I'll let you know about it in my July reading wrap-up, and maybe my August, because I'm not sure I'm going to finish that book. And that's a good point I'd like to share with you. If you didn't get through Joyful June, if for some reason you were reading other things from the month before and you couldn't get to Joyful June in June, absolutely, there's no rules here. If you want to go ahead and do that in the month of July, August, December next year, I don't care. I want to encourage folks to take some time in their life and in their reading life to find books that bring them joy. We have a lot of sadness and hate and bad things in our world that we should be focusing some on the more joyful things. And there's a time for serious as well. But if you find yourself kind of getting in a funk and are not super happy, maybe your mental health is taking a little dip, you might want to deliberately focus on some books that you really believe will bring you some serious joy. So anytime, do that, and put down in the comments below how you felt about it, the books you read, book recommendations you have that make you feel super joyful, because I'd love to hear about those. For Non-Judgmental July, the same thing. If you're like me and you might not finish your non-judgmental book in July, fine, finish it in August, finish it in September, but finish it sometime. Learn something new about yourself, and maybe about somebody that you didn't think you would enjoy that maybe you'll discover you do. So that's really all for today. If you have anything to tell me about, any great reading recommendations, please put them in the comment box below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Thanks. Bye.